Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to view Split Second. So, this movie, of course, is to really come off as a very cliche-ish detective film that tries to do more with this movie, but I don't think it goes far enough into, like, the other category direction as I would like it to. But, I really was won over by this movie via what it tries to do for visuals. How it goes on and is to present a world that is to be within the problems of global warming, and we have a place that is to be in eternal night, and we have here where it consistently rains, and so the places that they go into oftentimes are heavily flooded. And I was like, oh my god, this looks awesome. Like, just adding that little, like, I don't know if it was like they sought out those locations or like it just happened that way and they justified it in the film or something. But so I was just like, man, like, this is really cool to see this watered, like, environment. And I was like, wow, this is something, like, new to the table that, like, I applaud their effort for trying to do something that I was like wowed about. Plus, also we have like the goofy, unusual weaponry that is to be put in place in this film. Instead of just having your usual, like, hey, here's a handgun and here's your shotgun and here's no, like, they end up having like almost like Men in Black kind of weird goofy weaponry that I was like, oh wow, like, this is cool. Like, I liked this. Of course you can like the big massive weird goofy weaponry in this film. um but now I have to go on and say, like, this movie tries to be a supernatural film that is to just say that Harley Stone is going on and facing the devil in this film. And I was like, okay, like, that's a bit much. When they try to connect the dots and figure it out, that we just have the devil who needs to, like, come back to town to collect people's hearts. I was like, okay, like, that seems to be just the oddest kind of approach. Like, really, we could have gone on and just said that this character was some demon that got just loose from hell. Or I think it would have made a lot more sense if they would have gone on and just had this character be some kind of smaller fiddle kind of monster. They could have had it be that this character consistently goes on and attacks people, like, through their closets or through these doors, or like they could have had it be the boogeyman, and that would have made a lot more sense. And plus, also with the way that this monster would have actually been black, I would have bought that a lot more. Like, oh yeah, like the boogeyman. It makes sense to have this like blackened monster and whatever. Like the visuals of which that it like goes into. Maybe at certain points you can also have this monster like haunt people's dreams also, and again that would like justify it being the boogeyman. Um, and how I think they tried to go on and have Harley, who has all these horrible nightmares, finally when he does sleep, about his old partner. I'm like, man, you could have really played up a lot of those dream sequences, and hence why it would make all the sense in the world why Harley is to have not slept for 4 days. Or he really could have gone on and broke down and just be like, well, yeah, like, I can't sleep anymore because every time that I don't get this monster, like, I go to bed and I'm just thinking about my partner who is still dead. Like, it haunts me to this day. Like, I see like my partner everywhere I go, and every person, and so on and so forth. They could have really built this up uh, to have this be like Harley is haunted. Because if this is to be a supernatural kind of film, they could have built up something, but no. Um, but again, like, it all depends on budget with this film. I think that there's a lot of potential if this movie was to ever get rebooted, but I think there's like a better story here. But it's just like, man, if there ever was another one of these kinds of films where they just put the right story in place, man, would this movie have gone like to be even more of a cult classic than what it really was. And so, uh, like, I was just like, man, there's so much potential here. And so, with that said, yeah, like, I liked this movie because I was like, man, there's something here. So much so. So, in my brain, if I was to kind of rewrite this story, this would be like a solid, good film. Um, but kind of the way they just kind of go on further and further in the film, where the supernatural part just seems more and more unrational. This movie just falls as a solid okay, because visuals win me over. And so, but everything else seems so much like they're doing so much within their time allotted. Man, does this movie just really like it? It doesn't focus on the best of things, uh, but yeah, um, but yeah, like they are to also with like the set pieces they have, they really are to do like the best with them, and so yeah, so with that said, let's go on into teeing it up. What is this movie about? So we have Harley Stone, like Harley Davidson. We have like the Harley Davidson thing, kind of like the logo, like slapped in the back of the movie at towards the like the third act. So Harley is to try and track down and have a manhunt being done for this person who is to go on and rip hearts out of people. And so consistently, Harley, by the time he finds mostly just the next victim, Harley is like, man, like, you know what? Like, I can hear this thing's heartbeat and like I'm psychically connected to it, but I just can't figure out where this is. I want it so badly to just show itself and have this fight that I've been wanting for so long. And this thing is just teasing me and taunting me and saying, like, oh, hey, I'm back. Like, hey, I'm here. Ha 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 ha. But it just won't show itself. And so, Harley, of course, has gone on to be suspended. There's a whole history of him having a prior partner that at some point Harley had an affair with this guy's wife, and at some point also that turned around to have his partner die in the line of duty. So Harley then goes on and is to not be in any person's favor, and Harley then is to reasonably kind of mimic like he feels like Ron Perlman's Hellboy, or just Hellboy to me, like how he has this big massive trench coat and he goes on and just like simply with sunglasses, how we can like, and this guy at nighttime wears sunglasses, but just like the visual of that sunglasses, I'm like, wow, like how you could do something so simple and be so effective. But also I'm just like, how does this guy drive around with wearing these sunglasses? But I'm sure maybe it's just like, oh yeah, like the guy wasn't really driving. Like we would just kind of like tow truck him around, but still, yeah. Anyways, so Harley at some point would, of course, like any usual cop, once he is to be done from his suspension, we have Harley who is forced to team up with another partner who is to, of course, be a more bookworm like guy, and Dick Durkin is is to mention how he is to consistently, like, him and his wife are always to, like, sleep together every single day. And Durkin goes on to run 5 miles every day. And Harley's like, man, if you're getting some sweet loving from your wife, why are you running 5 miles? But so evidently Durkin is to have some really good cardio. But anyways, so uh so we have Harley and we have Durkin that is to continue to go through these cases to realize that there is to be this guy who consistently rips these hearts out of people, and everybody's going on and saying it's like, well, this must be like kind of a Jack Ripper case where uh, we have somebody who's kind of this doctor who's to kind of figure out a way to like cut into all these people and take these hearts out. But then Harley's like, no, like this guy is doing this thing with his hand for how unusual this thing becomes at some point, because Durkin and Harley realize that this monster likes, once it tries to go after somebody, it has to go after their heart. And so Stone and Durkin find this thing in a hospital, and it falls from the ceiling tiles, and we actually get to see like a second of it just kind of quickly running by, and they're like, oh my god, we need to get massive guns, huge guns. And so Durkin, after seeing this monstrous thing, is like having like coffee, and he's like, oh my god, like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna beat this thing? Plus, we start to really realize that they have to get more and more creative with how to try to take this thing down, as they realize that they're like, man, we've blown clips into this thing and it does nothing. And so, like, what are you guys, like, fighting? Like, the Predator? Is it the Predator? Because it looks like the alien Sigourney Weaver thing, but it seems more like the Predator, where it's like healing up or something. But come to find out, they have to rationalize by the end of this movie that both Harley and Durkin are fighting the devil, which doesn't rationally make sense to me. But somehow they just have to tie in like people's horoscopes, and they have to try to figure out the supernatural connection, which to me is just very weak. It's either, hey man, do a boogeyman kind of movie, where the monster just comes through these closets. That would make a lot of sense. Or just go on and just say it's some demon. Like a demon would make a lot more sense. Like the devil just seems like a stretch. But yeah, so with that said, I've spoken for long enough. There's a lot to break down in this movie, and so more than likely I probably won't remember everything, but there's a lot going on in this film for the time allotted. And I was like, man, they were really cramming a lot in here, plus giving me something fairly unique. We have at certain points where there is some kind of like unusual S&M like thing going on, like especially in like the nightclub. But then also you have like Harley, who has this kind of like this certain like gear on that I'm like, okay, like why does he have that gear? Like it probably looks futuristic, but like I'm not seeing that at any point. Like this guy has like grenades being put on this like unusual like harness belt like thing. Maybe in the future there is to be like, this thing is to be some kind of like harness like for back support, or like I wish that they could have gone on and like had there be like for Harley, who seems to be like struggling throughout his days. Like I wish they could have had like some future tech to just kind of throw on onto Harley, just like, okay, like this is going to be like his back harness, or this is going to be this, and he just has to slap this button and he'll like feel like a million times better so he can continue on with his job, because maybe that's what future cops are where um like they're running them ragged because they just have this future tech that if you just kind of put it on and you just slap a button, like we can have these characters really go on and like further like push themselves uh to certain limits, and we can have Harley have like a number of different injuries and stuff. um but anyways, that's waste of time. Let's go on into that double five time territory. Let's just go into spoilers. That's a lot of I need to say for this one. So it's about that time again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time we spoil this movie. So in the beginning of the film, we are to set up here that Harley is going into this nightclub. I think this is where I think that this movie ends up opening up with, but I could be wrong. Because usually, like the very opening of the movie, I'm like, oh, I forgot something. So Harley ends up going into this nightclub, and we have this dog that immediately like rushes in to bark at Harley, and Harley ends up showing the dog this badge, and so Harley ends up treating this dog like he would treat a normal human, even to the point where Harley is to realize that the dog had seen this monstrous thing. And so Harley's like, well, hey, like, if you've seen this thing, then I can see this thing, whatever it is. So, but Harley ends up going on flashing his badge to this dog. And then we go on and have a guy named JJ who ends up opening this door and is to tell the guy, like, hey, you have to pay a number of fees, so on and so forth, to even get in here. And then Harley flashes his badge, and the guy's like, oh, okay, all right, come on in. So Harley, of course, is to go into this place where it's heavily S&M. We have at one point some girl who is to be on stage, and it seems that she is to get further and further into showing us the top half of her body, it seems. We have Harley at one point that is to live and breathe off of like coffee, it seems. Like this guy, like throughout this film, like we should probably count how many freaking times this guy has drank coffee in this film, or either that or anyone in this film just drinking coffee. Because, man, you could possibly either have a drinking game for this film, or you can go on and just have a counting game, and man, would that also be fun. Maybe you could have like sour candies or something, and every time somebody would do like a cliche-ish like thing, you'd have to take the sour candy, and there you go. Especially if you're not much of a drinker. So, anyways, Harley goes on and lives and breathes off coffee and like maybe donuts. Like I didn't know what he was eating half of the time, and plus also like he would just kind of fling whatever like in his vehicle. Like there was this one funny time where like Harley gets into his like little Jeep car and he throws his coffee that has coffee in it into his vehicle. I'm like, wait, this is the weirdest thing that I've seen in a film, where a person would just be like, oh, okay, hey, yeah, I have a coffee. I'm going to throw it into the vehicle. It's going to fling everywhere. And because the cop just really does not care about how clean his vehicle is. Because you can see how, like there's so much, like, just garbage in the vehicle when we first see Harley just driving around. But anyways, back to the club. So I just wanted to like present the visual of Harley, and like how he used to be this like old curmudgeon detective and whatever. But anyway, so Harley is to have a woman mention to Harley. It's like, well, hey, like I'm a little afraid of going into this bathroom without somebody kind of watching over me. So like, hey, are you gonna like secure this door? And Harley's like, yeah, sure, go on ahead. So the girl probably takes a dump, and I don't know what she's doing. Maybe she's going in there to do drugs. Who knows? I don't know what kind of future this is. Do people still poo in this future? I don't know. In 2008, the past. So Harley then goes on to at some point hear a scream, and he makes his way to this bathroom to find this woman without a heart. So Harley just takes his trench coat and puts it over the woman's dead body, and I'm like, I wouldn't be doing that. Like, not only are you ruining the crime scene, but you're ruining a perfectly good trench coat. And plus, with it raining as often as it is, I wouldn't be putting my trench coat on. Like, no, I'm like, hey man, like, this is my trench coat. So a woman is to be dead, a heart is to be gone, and so Harley is to, of course, consistently trying to track this thing down because it can hear the heartbeat of it. Because, come to find out, we realize in this movie that, because it has to, like, perfectly showcase to us that Harley at one point is to have gotten, like, a claw through the arm and possibly the chest. And we have to, like, perfectly see this through a shirt that Harley has when he goes in the hospital at some point after he gets this kind of gas mask, or no, this oxygen mask, and they end up giving him a sedative to kind of knock him out. So we find out that he has like a psychic connection because of this claw mark. But so Harley goes on to desperately want to get to this thing and hunt it down, because even if Harley's on suspension, he's like, no, I'm going to go after this thing still. And, like, pretend that I'm a cop. Because I still have the badge. And Harley can be a PI or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. Probably a suspended cop, you probably wouldn't be able to have a private investigator's license. But anyways, he's probably pretending to be a cop so he can get through certain things. And so anyways, moot point. So Harley then, of course, is to realize that this monstrous thing is back and it's killing people. So Harley then goes on to the police station to where we have Thrasher, who is to be Harley's boss, who is to set him up with Dick Durkin, Detective Durkin. And this guy, of course, is to be presented as a bookworm, a guy who is to, like, know too much, to where Harley just probably wants to shut this guy up consistently. But anyways, so like Durkin becomes like the Robin to Harley's Batman. But like normally Robins aren't going on and like being like the bookworms. They're just to have like a hefty amount of one-liners. As Batman is just to come in and be like, yeah, I'm gonna kick butt and just say nothing because that's what I do. So Harley ends up going to his boss after handing over his gun, and we have this detective that this officer, every single time that Harley ends up handing over this gun, this officer consistently has to look it over and be like, this gun, yeah. What? Like, she has this, like, F-you face every single time she sees this gun come in. It's like, give me some of that. Oh, yeah. Like, she's gonna polish it up when this guy's not around. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna clean this gun. Yeah. It's so weird. But hey, like, if it gives this woman something to do in this film, then by all means. But it just seemed weird. So Harley speaks with Thrasher, and that's when, of course, he ends up getting his new young detective. And so we also have Harley, that it seems is to have another detective that just freaking hates him for whatever goofy reason. Uh, we have a guy named Paulson who just hates Harley, and like we just don't really know why. It's just Paulson is like, I don't really have a real reason, but I just hate you. Cause like Paulson is to like narrow down. It's like, well, yeah, like it could be just like this or it could be that, but no, I just don't like you. And so it's like, okay, that's to narrow it down a lot better. So yeah, so Harley at some points is to try to give Paulson like work to do, and Paulson just doesn't want to do it. He's like, no, how about you do it? Like, and so Harley is to really throw his weight around to Paulson and just be like, well, like, you could easily go on and do this job, but you just don't want to do it. And plus, like, I outrank you, so. Because, like, Harley seems to be, like, much more of, like, a detective to just this officer guy. But so. But, anyways, let's get past this. So, Harley ends up getting his new detective, and so. We are to go on and have this next case that they come to find out is to uh, be with uh, some guy who had his heart ripped out in this location in this kind of apartment complex. And so we have Durkin following Harley in his own vehicle, and Harley quickly puts on the brake, and so does Durkin, and Durkin crashes into Harley's car, leaving them to now go into this place with, like, okay, I'm sorry, I kind of bumped into your car. You kind of quickly put on the brake. But, anyways, so they go into this location, and they find that someone's heart's been ripped out. And they also find out in the ceiling that there seems to be some unusual pentagram like thing going on with numbers and letters and so on and so forth. And so Durkin, it seems, is to go on and have a number of these books all trying to figure it out, what this all could mean. And at some point he's a quick reader, and he must not really sleep all that often, because Durkin is consistently at Harley's place, just kind of following him consistently. But anyways, so uh, after this case, after they start to kind of figure things out, we have Harley that goes back to the office, and we have Paulson complaining to Harley about, like, well, hey, like, why do you have this cooler here? Like, someone delivered this, and like, did somebody give you beer? Like, are you trying to drink beer in the office? Like, what are you trying to pull, Harley? And so there are certain people that want to go on and easily open up this cooler, and Stone is just like, no, wait, like, could be a bomb. So we have this kind of slowly but surely, like, well, like, it does, like, it is keeping something cold inside there. So Stone is like, no, I think we can probably open this up because it's probably just an organ, another, like, heart or something to tease us. So they open this cooler up and come to find out it's another organ, and they're like, oh my god, like, yeah, like, this is from this creature and it's teasing us. So we go on and we have Harley, who at one point is to want to take some time away. And so Harley goes on to visit his old partner, who of course is dead. So Harley goes to his friend's burial location, and he bumps into Michelle, who is also to mourn the loss of her past husband. And so both Harley and Michelle, since Michelle is back in town, Harley brings Michelle to his place, which really just looks awful. It does not look clean whatsoever, like his car, so it makes a lot of sense. But then not only that, there's like a whole thing where Harley ends up going on to this fridge and putting a bunch of chocolates on the fridge, and Michelle just is to take one of these chocolates off and like eats it. And I'm like, oh my god, like this fridge looks so gross. Why would you eat this chocolate? Like to me, I was just like, this doesn't look clean. Ah, please don't go on and eat that. But also we have another scene where Harley is just taking this random cup that might have coffee in it and might have other things. And like Harley is like, yeah, let's drink from this. I'm like, how about we not? So much about it, I was like, that looks gross. But I'm sure a number of this movie was all very sanitized, right? It really looks dirtier than what it really is. Anyways, so we have Harley that when he is with Michelle, Harley finally goes on to fall asleep, and so Michelle ends up taking care of Harley, and so Harley ends up dreaming of his partner the last time he saw him, where both of them were going out for some call, and we have Foster, who is Harley's partner, that just gets, I guess, dragged under this water and killed by the monstrous character, but we never really get to see much beyond him just getting dropped into this water spot, and Foster just vanishes, and then we just have to figure out later that he died somehow. There isn't much of a real visual for that beyond what we have to naturally assume. So I'm assuming probably every night Harley has this nightmare, so he ends up not really sleeping all that much. Even though 4 days of not sleeping would go on and really do a number on a person. So, at some point, Harley does get up to realize that Durkin is to have read all these books. And so, we have Harley that ends up going off to this diner to start to have Durkin connecting all these dots about Scorpios and how also Harley, like his birthday is to be a Scorpio month, and possibly at some point there's a reason why this killer is trying to go after Harley, because it all ties to horoscopes. So, and we're also at some point going to do the usual thing whenever we have like a mandala kind of thing, or a pentagram. We always have to connect the dots of the pentagram, and it's like, well, hey, like, where is this going to, like, strike next? Of course, in the one spot that's left. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we go on and we have them figure out that this is like the Scorpio killer, but they figure it out later, or they put the pieces together that it has to be something to do with the devil for some goofy reason. So we have the next kill that happens in Harley's like apartment complex. It seems that they end up getting a call, and the call is coming from a specific address, and Harley's like, oh my god, like, that's my place. So Harley and Durkin run off to find out that Michelle is in the shower and she's fine. And they're like, okay, so like, why did we get a call here? And so they go into the hallway to realize that there is another person screaming. And so come to find out, that leads them to go to this other apartment. And of course, this person is already dead. They're in this tub and their heart is ripped out. And like, oh, okay, like, well, yeah, like this didn't pan out like to go on and hopefully stop this crime before it happens. But so we have the monster that now goes on and is to grab this big cannon like weapon from Harley's Jeep. He like rips open this thing and he ends up taking this gun. So we then have Michelle, who is screaming for Harley as this monster had gone on to attack her and bitten her on the shoulder. So when Harley rushes in to try and uh, go on and subdue this monster with his big massive gun, as he has gone on in firing practice and like shot uh, these wood pieces and like really like showed the impact of this weapon. So we had Durkin, who ends up getting shot, but he has a bulletproof vest, so he's fine. And so Harley is doing all like he's going through every bit of this furniture. He's flipping and flopping and flying around everywhere in this place, trying to like fire against this monster that now has this weapon. So there's this back and forth thing going on between them. And so at one point, Harley continues to fire into this monster to the point of the monster now needing to just run away. And so Harley's mentioned, like, man, I like point blank range fired into this thing and it did nothing. So Harley is to get a quick glimpse of possibly what this thing is, but again, still not sure. So we have Harley check on Michelle, and Michelle had her like her shoulder getting bit into. So we also had an organ that was bit into also, and so they went on to get like some graph of possible teeth of what this thing could really be. And when Harley actually gets this thing, Harley gives this to Durkin, and it's to state, it's like, what kind of person would make these kind of teeth marks? No one can. So this has to be something more than just some human being. And so, because they get a sculpt of this thing, and it seems so unusual. So they are to have, at one point, they have another victim. This time around, it seems that they do not get the heart out of the victim. And so they go on to realize, like, well, like, if the thing is not going to go on and get the heart from this, then maybe it's going to, because it needs this victim, maybe it's going to go back and try to get it via the morgue or the hospital or whatever. Probably the morgue. So Harley and Durkin go to the morgue to find this patient, and yeah, like the monster comes back, takes its heart, and then runs off through the ceiling tiles. And so Harley and Durkin are thinking, like, do you think that this thing is gone? Yeah, me too, right? Uh-huh, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So the thing falls through the ceiling tiles, and then they get a good look of it, and they're like, oh my god! And so Durkin is now shaken. He's like, oh my god, like, this is horrific. So the the demon, the devil, the creature, is to run off, and I think we only see like the head of it, maybe a little bit, and like the hands of it, but we don't see like the body of it. So like, really, if you kind of like pause it right, it just looks like a normal person kind of running around with like a helmet and like hands on, and it could be just anybody. They could have like, in all honesty, what they could have actually done is they could have really just had this be like a half human, half monster thing. That it doesn't always have to be a monster. You could really just have like an interesting looking human also to like really save on some money here. But then you could have also like played around with like maybe for the human side of things you could play with the eyes, or you could have really gone on and done something like unusual. But anyways, so uh Durkin is to mention to Harley that they need really big guns and they're freaking out. So they're now figuring out, considering this is a monster, they're having Durkin, who is to just like, hey, you gotta hear me out now. Like, I figured out how to go on and connect this all to just have this be the devil. And Harley is hearing him out and is like, yeah, like this makes all the sense in the world. Not really, but sure, give me the speech about the devil. And so Thrasher is to also go on and hear this nonsense. And Thrasher is just like, man, like sure, yeah, I guess whatever you guys say, like as long as you give me some kind of like killer by the end of this, whatever. So Thrasher just leaves, and he's just frustrated by kind of hearing like that they're going after the devil now, and Thrasher's just like, I give up. Like, I've given up trying to try to like wrangle in Harley and try to figure out whatever this case is. I'm out of here. Like, Thrasher's out of here. So they have at one point where the monster keeps coming after Michelle. So of course this is the whole like bringing back to the whole Foster thing. So, and we have to have a damsel in distress, and Michelle just has to fit that bill. As we consistently have times where Harley and Michelle are just kissing in unusual amounts of like. There's just certain scenes where, like, at the end of most of them, they're just kissing, and I'm like, seems kind of just odd. Like, the kissing doesn't really fit for, like, what they're doing in this film. But, like, I'm like, well, like they have to show that there's a relationship here and that there's probably going to be some kind of romance, but like there isn't like a huge amount of like connecting the dots here. But so Harley is to go back home, and Harley is to notice that there's an organ in his fridge as they try to look on to find milk, and realize that there's another like bloodied up fridge. So these characters go on and get these massive guns, and Durkin ends up seeing a rat and then just blasts this whole kitchen and destroys it, like as if this is Ghostbusters all over again, where when they go into the like the Sedgwick Hotel, they're going on and like destroying every bit of the Sedgwick Hotel, because of course like they're new at this. This is the first ever case. And so they're blasting first, asking questions never. So Harley goes on to meet up with Michelle, who is now traumatized because she is to have opened up the fridge and seen the organ there. And so Michelle just starts consistently, she's in this tub with a ton of water. Durkin is saying that Harley's going to need a plumber. So Harley goes on to see that Michelle is to have consistently had the water running in this tub, and she's consistently scrubbing her hands with this soap. She has a massive amount of soap in her hands, and she's just consistently washing her hands. I'm like, how long was Michelle going on and having this soap on her hands and so on and so forth? But we finally have Harley that is trying to break Michelle out of the spell by kind of putting like water and like putting the sponge upon Michelle's hands, and I'm sure they kiss like 4 or 5 more other times here. So, uh, like I know this isn't all like fluid and whatever. Like I know there's some steps that I missed here. There's a lot going on in this film. There's so much going on. So we have Harley and Durkin, uh, who are to go on and do another case, and while that's happening, we have Michelle who's realizing that the monster is coming after her. And so that, of course, leads this monster who's to kind of do like the Freddy Krueger uh, kind of visual where we see these claws coming through the thing where Michelle is sleeping in, or sleeping on, or just kind of laying on top of. And so Michelle tries to get away from this thing, but the thing ends up catching her. And so this all leads to now Harley and Durkin, who need to find this guy called the Rat Catcher to lead them down these tunnels of where, of course, Michelle is. And so that leads them to like the big battle, the big fight towards the end here. And funny enough, we have Harley and Durkin who are to talk with these guys who quickly end up getting killed as we have both Durkin and Harley going through these tunnels and trying to get through this location. And when they open up this like door, we see these guys' bodies just fall over and they're dead. It's like, okay, that seemed unusual. We also had Durkin that kind of falls, I guess, through this hole in the ground, and we like are to assume that it's like, well, did he die like Harley's partner did? But then he resurfaces. So Harley's now telling Durkin, it's like, hey, stop messing around. Like, that wasn't funny. And so Durkin like goes on with Harley, and so the thing that I thought was so unusual. They also went on into like we have the cliche moment where we have Harley and Durkin who go through like the police equipment to find the biggest, most massive gun. It was like, oh, a grenade launcher? That's not going to be good enough. We have to go on and get all these bombs, and we have to get this big, massive, like almost minigun to really like get this big, fat gun, so on and so forth. So, or like scatter gun. So, to like bust down a forest or try to really go on and really wipe out what they're trying to face here. So luckily they didn't go on and strap a big massive gun to some truck like they did in Jeepers Creepers 3, right? How would that would have worked out in this setting? Probably not that well. So we have Durkin and we have Harley making it to this subway station where Michelle, it seems, is to be hanging roped in this lidded area. So there actually is light in this movie. They can't actually light things in this film because everything else has to be so dark. But there's probably a reason for that, because special effects and so on and so forth. Or what they were trying to do with the costume character, trying to show as little as possible. So it seems that there is some trap set, and both Harley and Durkin realize this. So what they try to do here is they assume if Michelle is going to start to move, that the monster is going to spring from out of this underwater spot that she's in. And so they tell her to kind of swing her legs so that way Michelle could make it to the top of this subway and have her kind of climb over Durkin. And we then have Harley, who is to see the devil spring, and so Harley tries to shoot it. So we have a moment where both Michelle and Durkin are trying to run here because the monster ends up getting into the subway car, and he ends up putting his hand through this car and trying to chase after Michelle and Durkin with this. So they're trying to go on and put a decent defense up. We have Harley that is trying to shoot up this thing and so on and so forth. And nothing is really panning out all that well. So we have a moment where Harley, Mitchell, and Durkin ends up getting away from this thing, and they end up finding this like electrical wire. So Harley has the plan of like, well, hey, let's electrify it. Let's see if that works. So Harley is to grab this wire and wants Michelle to give him slack for this wire. So Harley figures out a way to electrify the subway car, and that still doesn't really do anything. And so the alien is now go on and put its hand on Harley and is to want to, at this point, kill Harley off. So we have Durkin, who is to have this idea of like, well, hey man, we have this like this weird looking flash grenade like thing. Maybe that will work against this monster. So when Harley, Michelle, and Durkin get out of the subway again and they try to fight this thing off, we have them use this bomb, and so it seems like the bomb ends up weakening it, and so Harley goes on and does what this monster has gone on to do to a number of people. Harley ends up ripping the heart out of this thing, and he ends up having it in his hand, and he shoots the heart. And so this devil ends up collapsing, and it seems to be now in pieces, and they're like, okay, we must have beaten this thing. Harley questions Durkin, it's like, do you think that this thing is dead? And Durkin's like, I guess. Like, that makes the most sense. So they end up all walking away, and so the next thing that we end up seeing is like all three of these characters are now on this boat. We have Durkin, who is to kind of write them off here in this kind of cliche-ish kind of ending like narration. And Harley's like, hey, Durkin, save it. Like, you've talked long enough. So yeah, so they kind of end in this kind of like roundabout way, or very odd like way. Or trying to be like a traditional like movie where it tries to like end with some monologue. But so, anyways, with that said, I think I've gone on and said quite a bit of this movie. But then again, I've also like I really had to like figure out a way to put all this stuff in here. One thing that I also had to mention. It seemed that this monster, whenever it would go on and it would either like stab into anybody, or whenever it would go on and take someone's heart, it would have their DNA. So when they were to go on and get fingerprints, they would find out that the fingerprints would match one of the victims from before, or every single DNA would have like everyone that it's ever like stabbed into or that it has killed. So, uh, like I thought that that was kind of very fascinating for this film, but it like really is to be just like a token or bonus thing to just add in here. Uh, but yeah, but I think other than that, I think everything else, like I really had like there's so much stuff in here. Um, there of course were moments where Durkin and Harley were to be at odds with one another, where Harley would take Durkin's keys and find out that there was to be this like wrestling action figure that was on his keychain, and so Harley tossed Durkin's keys into this water, and so Durkin couldn't drive his car anymore. Or we'd have moments where Harley would just like, "Hey man, like come into this car like I'm driving. Like you're gonna follow me around anyways, so like let's just drive in one car." So so yeah. Other than that, yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to go on and say. Like there's so much about this film. More than likely, if I'm to go on and watch it again, I would probably have so many other things to go on and say. So yeah, so with that said, I think I'm just gonna leave it here. Just kind of call this one a review. Let me know in the comments below if there's any little details that I forgot about, because I'm sure that there probably is, especially for this one. There's so much. But either way, at the end of the day, I'm gonna go on and get out of here. Bye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.